morning. Welcome to Thursday's edition of Lovebabz, Lovetalk, which is going to feel like the Criminal Justice Insider because I got special guests in the house today, and we're going to be talking about, we got a lot to talk about, hyper mass incarceration and this beautiful documentary that I saw yesterday. So yesterday, I went to see a film screened by Bogucki, right? She's a detective from Seattle, Washington, and she's the co-founder of the IF Project, a innovative partnership between law enforcement, currently and previously incarcerated adults, community leaders, to build commonality, reduce misperceptions, and serve as a deterrent to recidivism and future incarceration. So I watched this documentary yesterday. It was amazing, and I left last night with If on My Mind. So she's in the studio today to talk about why she did this. State Rep Robin Porter is here because she was in the house with me last night. And so y'all just strap in and get ready for a good conversation. Good morning, y'all.
Good morning.
How are you all?
Good. Bless.
I went to bed with If on My Mind, the question. And I don't, it took me like all night to figure out where would I answer this question in my life? Like, where could I answer this, and where could the interruption of the trajectory of my life could have been different? I don't know if I wanted it to be different, but there's some things that I wish. But the if question was big. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to New Haven.
I love it here. Thank you. It's a little early for me. I got my coffee, though.
Girl. And, we got a Starbucks on the corner.
Well, I got something good. I got Cafe Java right around the corner, too.
Cafe Java is my jam.
Good jam.
So tell me about this documentary.
Well, I think also just kind of piggybacking on what you said, I think if is a question that I continue to ask myself.
Get closer to, bring that mic.
Sorry, is that better?
Yeah, turn it a little bit yeah.
I think that if is a question that I continue to ask myself kind of on a weekly or daily basis, because I think it could be something that we could all do continually to figure out where we want to be and where we've come from and how we would, if we wanted to change things, how we would, to change our path. But if started 10 years ago back in Washington Correction Center for Women when I was asked to work with a group of girls whose mothers were incarcerated. I'm a police officer at Seattle Police Department, so they fully support this project. And we have an awesome new chief, Chief Carmen Best, who's been behind this for the last 10 years. And when I walked in there, I wanted to ask the women's permission because I did not want them to call home and have their daughters say, the police were at, Girl Scout troop meeting today, and for them to go, oh my gosh, I wonder what the police are saying to my daughter about me because I'm incarcerated. And making the decision to go in and talk to the women and ask permission to engage with their daughters was probably one of the best things that I've done in my career, because it's the thing that opened my eyes to what is really going on in this country regarding incarceration and the people that are actually incarcerated, the benefit that they can bring to the table into reducing this hyper mass incarceration that we have by the sharing of their stories. So that's how it all began 10 years ago.
Now, did you think you'd be doing this for 10 years?
Oh, no. No, I wake up every morning feeling extremely blessed that I'm in a position that I'm trusted. And
because that's a big deal.
I'm trusted as a white person. I'm trusted as in a position of authority to share some people's, or amplify, I should say, people's sometimes very painful, traumatic stories in order to make change. And I think that's how we end up making changes, is by sharing each other's stories and finding those common threads that we didn't think that we had, so that people can start looking at things differently and we can come together as opposed to staying very siloed and fractured, especially in this country right now. There's a lot of us versus them, and we need to be getting back to that us.
So, all right, before we get really into the film, so the Women's Consortium had hosted this event last night. Yeah. Had myself, the governor's first wife, First Lady Kathy Malloy, and a young white woman next to me, who is a peer-to-peer counselor kind of thing.
Allie Kernan.
Allie Kernan, who was remarkable.
Yes, she was.
To sit there and calmly say, I was a heroin addict and I had all the labels and I had all these things, and I imagine that it's stunning to be in spaces where people think of her one way until she tells her story, and then she becomes another way. So the Women's Consortium hosted this event. how did you get here? Like, how did they bring you? How do you know them?
I believe that it was the Adult Female Juvenile Offender Conference last year in California that we screened the documentary at, and the executive director, I believe, was there and saw it and said, I would really like to bring you out to do some work in Connecticut with the Women's Consortium. And then we started having a discussion about what's being done in Connecticut, which there's always a lot of work to continue to do, but there's a lot of really interesting progressive work being done here. And when you're actually having women doing work, the work usually gets done a little bit more. It's a different. We just do things differently, and so I was really.
We just do things.
We just do, yeah, like exactly. Especially women of color. Thank you very much. They're the ones that make a lot of change in this country. So, I do think that when they called and said we're interested in doing this, we want to screen the documentary, and I was talking to them about doing. I'm like, you know what? I would really love to come out and be a part of that, so that we can share what we're doing on the West Coast and take a look at what you're doing here and figure out where we don't have to reinvent wheels, but we can actually collaboratively work together, because that's how we build a web and a network to make change that's a lot stronger instead of staying individualized.
Because I'm at the what's her name? Tamara, the woman who was at Yale the other couple of weeks, Tarana Burke. And so I'm walking down the aisle to my seat, and Kathleen comes up to me, and she's like, "Hi, are you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "I want you to." I want to get in touch with you, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, I didn't think nothing of it, because people are always rolling up on me. And then I get this flurry of, okay, this is what we're doing. Can you come? Do you want to know about this? And I was like, all right.
Okay.
But there's a lot of people who are working in criminal justice, and so I hear about it. But when I found out that this documentary was about women who were incarcerated, and it was a little different than the normal kind of, you could tell somebody's story, but not ever hear it in their own voice.
Right.
And this film gives these women opportunity to say from a real place what is happening.
Well, I also think, the documentary was filmed for 7.5 years. So if you think about when we first went in, everybody was a little bit nervous, because we were actually putting our what today is our standard writing workshop together with them. So they have been building every program with us along the way for 10 years, and we have 6 now. And Kathleen Horan, the filmmaker and co-founder of the IF Project, she decided to roll film for 7.5 years. So she was able to capture so many things because of her talent to actually make this what I feel like is pretty real and raw and genuine, and from these women's hearts in a place that people would not think that maybe they could actually get there. And we've often heard that, even, sometimes in these workshops that they don't feel like they're necessarily in prison at that moment, and they're maybe back to some of these places. There's a really powerful piece that I've talked about in the workshop where one of the women talks about when she took another woman's life, and it is her forgiveness piece. And, it is extremely intense. And the one thing she said, because we always talk to people before we put anything up for the world to see, are you okay with this? And she said, it was the first time that I finally started letting go of everything that I'd been holding on to for so long. So I think that we've had the ability with, Amber Flame is our writing. She's helped us write these workshops, and she works for IF. And, collectively we put something together. And because we've been consistently going in there, we've built trust over the years for people to show up and know it's not going to be easy. You're going to do the work, but you're also going to create a community inside that's going to be there and supportive for you. And since we've been working on reentry in the last 6 years, we've also had that external piece. So we have that continuum of care of, let's do the work while you're that quote unquote captive audience. And then let's also figure out what you need personalized. So when you get out, your reentry maybe looks different than it would before, because you've actually started doing the work on the social emotional things that brought you in there. And we can hopefully take what you've told us and help you build programs, or help build programs on the outside that can benefit all. And also, you can take your story and your experience and stepping up and doing it and help create this program. Because IF would not be IF without the women, the men, and the youth behind it that have actually shared their story. And I really, Robin, you've done some amazing work here, and the one thing that I love about doing this stuff is how we end up meeting like-minded, common goal focused people,
valued people. Yes. And I was most impressed because I've always said the people closest to the solution are the ones closest to the problem. And recently went to visit Manson Youth, and one of the things that one of the young men said that was really still resonates with me is, we're voiceless. We don't have a voice. No matter what happens, our word means nothing. and then to see what you're doing by giving them voice and giving their story power, because there's so much power in story. And I think when people see the If Project, for me personally, what it said was, they're human. You bring the humanity to a space where people are not necessarily treated in a humane way. And you give them women back their dignity, you know? And I think that is something that's just priceless.
I tell you what I was most struck by in this film. There's a couple of things. I love the young woman who was running the actual writing component and the pieces. And when you go back to it.
That's Amber Flame. Amber Flame.
I loved her because she'd throw these questions out. And I felt like a gut punch. I was like, oh my God. I mean, I wanted to write them all down because I was like.
I did.
Thank you, Robin. And you send them to me because I thought the questions was amazing. But the other thing that was quite telling was you coming in and out, showing you coming in and out over this 7-year period, like just consistently coming in and out. And you seemed unfazed, like, this is what I'm doing. And you were just coming in and out. And I was like, how does she keep doing this? Like, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand coming in and out like that.
Yeah. I don't know why I
feel
suddenly emotional. So,
this is very, it's a personal choice.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy.
Well, it's twofold because, I mean, I've been a cop for 30 years in Seattle, and I've been.
Did you get on the force when you're 12?
Thank you. She needs a bonus. I'll pay later. Yeah, and so I think the thing for me is I always tell, you know, a lot of the work that I want to do moving forward is somewhat police reform related, but also, you know, there's officers out there that we don't get to hear the story when we're going from call to call to call about the reason, like, what is the story behind what led us to this, that we're actually putting handcuffs on somebody. And before we know it, there's the next call and the next call. And I think it was important for me, after being on the street for so long, and, you know, I was riding bicycles, which gets you even more upfront and personal with people, doing a lot of work with homelessness, which, you know, homelessness feeds right into the whole incarceration issue. I mean, it's so intertwined like a tapestry. But I just was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, we have to be doing things differently, because we can't arrest ourselves out of homelessness or the opioid crisis, or, you know, whatever the thing is. We have to figure out different ways. And I really learned early on from a group of homeless kids when I started hearing their stories, because of what my perception was that I thought led them to homelessness. And when they actually started sharing their stories, is like, wow, it is very different. And we do have the ability, especially in positions of power, to figure out how to make the change that's needed to prevent or intervene, you know, do an intervention, and or have them be a part of the solution. Because that's the other thing too, in positions of power, Robin. I mean, I'm sure you stand up to it all the time with the work that you do, is bringing that voice to the table of the audience that we're trying to serve is the most critical piece in doing any of the work.
Absolutely.
And that's what we've been able to do. And for me also in policing, because, you know, we have an issue in this country. We've disproportionately put people in prison and jail of color, and that goes back, I said it last night. Take 100 minutes of your take 90 or 100 minutes of your life and watch the movie 13 to understand where we are right now, how we got to the place that we are. And we have to start back there when we start to do this healing. We start doing maybe policing different, or as a community look at communities of color differently, because it started way back then, and this is where we are now. And we cannot walk into a meeting, we cannot walk into a community and come to it from our lens if we don't understand the lens that has been ingrained for generations in their lives, and how we're doing policing, and how we're taking a look at incarceration and homelessness. And overarching, you know, reason for incarceration is poverty. So you can go back to, you get a record, you can't get a job. That's today, and that was also hundreds of years ago. So, you know, I think there's just a lot of a holistic eye that needs to be put on this. And I think part of that is telling story to rehumanize what we have thought of this population that I always say literally and figuratively, I had put them away for a long time, you know, in policing. And it's like, wait a second, these are people that I would hang out with. These are people that I don't want to be judged by the worst thing that I've done in my life for the rest of my life. Because if this system is supposed to work that we have, right? You do your time, you do your crime, you do your time, and you're supposed to be able to come back. Well, that is not happening.
Nope.
It's not true.
Any one of us in this room, in order to survive, would probably commit a crime in order to survive, especially a woman that's trying to take care of her children.
So Robin, so you were at the, we have a youth prison here, or detention center, Manson Youth Detention, right? And so you were just there a couple of days ago.
Yep.
And so this is why this is so timely for you, because you had just on the heels of visiting that place and seeing it, stayed in your spirit, and then coming to see this film sort of brought you full circle. So talk a little bit about that.
It did. You know, it's always been my mission, and this is what is so cool about meeting my girl here, because we are on the same mission, just in different states. And I recognize the passion and the spirit within you working. And it was like, I got there, and as we watched the documentary, you know, your if question, and I want you to state the if question, the first one.
If there was something somebody could have said or done to change the path that led you here, what would it have been?
Okay. Now, what's the second if question?
If there was something somebody could say or do today to help you on your path, what would it be?
That was the question that I was asking on my visit a couple of days ago, which is very, and I'm not going to say ironic, because I believe in a higher power. And
Absolutely.
I believe that this is divine appointment, right? And it was astounding to me, the responses that I was getting from the young men that we sat with. And one in particular, you know, he had been taken out of his home from his mom at the age of 3. She was on drugs, DCF care. And at 4, he was adopted. Now, the adopted mom is who he's legally still under, but she doesn't come to see him. She doesn't take calls. And I asked him, you know, what do you need? What could we do, right? If you have access to us, we're here because we care, because you matter. What is it that you need? And this kid looked at me, and without hesitation, he said, love. I've never been loved. I don't know what that is. And I'm in an environment right now that tells me that I don't matter and they don't care. And I'm like,
not worthy of it.
That I'm not worthy of it. And this is just the way it is. And there's nothing I can do about it, because in this place, I don't have a voice. And I'm an extension just like you. And that's what I had to relay to him. I'm your voice. I will amplify whatever it is you need me to state on your behalf. And I love you. I consider you mine. I consider all of them mine. And it's not a matter of personally having to know them. You know, and I think that's the thing that frustrates me the most, because in the work that I do, you know, we claim to be making progress on paper. But when we look at it for real, when we are arresting 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds, there's something wrong with the system. When we know scientifically that the frontal cortex of the brain does not develop until the age of 25, 26.
And 26, 27 for young men.
For young men. Because yes, we do mature. Yep. We do mature sooner,
yes,
right?
We do.
I think that's why we do this better. But and nothing against my men.
That's right.
But it was very emotional. It was very heavy. Watching the documentary was very heavy. I think me and Ife was doing like the most heavy breathing in the place yesterday, because it was like you had to exhale. You had to exhale. You know, I cried. It's emotional. It's emotional because we discount people and we discard people and we judge people without understanding their experience. And I think that experience is what shapes your perspective. And until you have an opportunity to tell your story, you don't have an opportunity to change a viewpoint. Right. And it's because of your heart and your passion and the work that you do, you were able to say, you know what? There's another side of this that I'm missing. There's something that I need to see. And when you went inside, I mean, it blew my mind to see you like walking back and forth out of prison. You got a detective doing this work. Yeah. And that is a message that needs to be resonated over and over again.
I think you're right, Robin. I think that's, for me, that's the bigger takeaway. Because, you know, you could spend your time doing anything. I mean, you could do police athletic league.
Are you saying coffee and donuts or something?
Yeah, well, I mean, you could do police athletic league and be like, this is my commitment to community,
right,
and be done, but not go inside a prison and like get it, because this is real mental health work. Like, and I don't know if these women, I know these women have never been asked that question. They've never been asked. No one has ever concerned themselves with their "how did you get here" component.
Well, and not what crime did you do that led you to get here? Like, you know, we often talk about Renata for example, she's like, nobody ever asked me like the reason why I robbed the store to get the drugs. Like, let's dial it back to what happened that even led you to having to do something like that, you know. And I'm super interested in meeting the police chief here because I've heard really good things about him. Chief Campbell. And I work for, Chief Carmen Best and Lieutenant Adrian Diaz. Like, those people have been like huge supporters for 10 years of this work, when it's swimming upstream constantly to put a uniform on and also go into a community that does not like uniforms and try to sit down and have a conversation and go, no, seriously, I'm not here to give you lip service. I want to figure out how we can build community. And, the one time in the documentary that I walk into my uniform, you probably don't notice it, but obviously I don't have my gun on. And when I'd been coming in and out for like 3 months. So when I walked in and the women are all like, they laughed and whistled. And so the air got sucked out of the room for a second, because it was the reality too of what I represent, because of what a uniform represents
in the community.
Communities that are impacted by police. And it's like, okay, this is my job. I want you to know that. But when I take it off, I can sit in the room with you, and we're both human beings trying to figure out how to make a difference in the world. And, I appreciate, people always say, oh, you do all this work, but, there's no this work or me able to do these amazing things without them. And that is critical. Without them stepping forward and getting vulnerable and going, you know what, I'm going to look at my stuff. So that we didn't realize at the beginning, but I'm going to look at my stuff so that I can prevent somebody else from following in my footsteps. So it was completely selfless. And what we started seeing happen is they started going through the beginning of their healing process, and we're like, wow, let's build some programs around it. Let's put your names on it, because you're the ones doing the work. We're just going to help facilitate it. So that's how we've been able to build the programs of IF too, is right from the people's mouths that are most impacted to make the change.
So how do you fund this? Do you fund it? Do you fundraise? Do people grant you money?
IF became its own nonprofit May of 2017. So we were under the Seattle Police Foundation for, thank goodness, for nine years or 8.5 years. But it just got too big, and it was a lot of work for one person to do. I was attached to community outreach. I'm currently attached to community outreach at work. But we were able to become our own nonprofit. I get to do this job as for the police department and help run the programs, and it's got its own board. And Amber Flame now is the director of reentry. She's the one you saw teaching the class. Dolphy Jordan he's an unbelievable man who served 23, went in at 16. He's actually does our reentry with the women, which I love the fact that they have a very healthy male figure that's been in the system that they actually get to do their reentry work with. And then we have Emily Stephan from Seattle University, who has been impacted by incarceration in her life as a young woman, and is a huge, she's just a little beacon of light for us to learn from, from a 19-year-old's perspective on how they can make the change. And I think that's something you and I talked about, or I did last night with somebody about, these young kids that are coming up are the ones that are going to have to really call us older adults on the carpet to make the change and register to vote so that we can actually make the change.
Absolutely. I call them the Joshua generation. Yep. And I say that this is the generation that's going to turn all of this around, because they are far removed enough to not have all the baggage that we carry.
Yep.
And I don't think their biases run as deep. I think that their surface is much more, forgiving and open.
Right.
And the thing that really amazed me yesterday, and it just came to me as you were talking, is vulnerability is where the healing happens. And in the documentary, they were talking about, hey, you were coming in here asking these questions, and, you want me to talk about how I was molested or how this happened and that happened. And then they're going to use that against me, because you can't trust nobody in here. And my son was in prison. He did almost 7 years. And that was the thing. You didn't talk to nobody. You didn't tell nobody about your charges. No, that was taboo, because that was information that could be used against you in a way that could be physically harmful, right? And the fact that you were and are able to go in that environment as a cop who is not trusted, because in communities of color, not only are you not liked, you're not trusted. And sometimes with good reason. So to be able to go into that environment and change the culture of what was happening and is happening in that prison is phenomenal. It is phenomenal.
Well, it's very interesting, because we've done the writing workshops in the men's prison. Our education piece is about 45 minutes, and it's a lot more filmed inside the prison from the folks that are the clients that are there that are incarcerated. and kind of their stories and their answers to some of the if prompts for the writing workshop. And I went into the men's prison, and I mean, literally, we had Bloods, Crips, BGDs, Norteños, Sereños, Aryan Brothers. I mean, we had like,
Lord.
It was like, I walked in, I was like, oh, this is going to be really interesting. But what happened is they all started sharing their story, and then they started going, wow, like,
we're more alike than we thought.
Exactly. And then they're like, one of the guys raised his hand and goes, Kim, this is really interesting. We're male bonding. This doesn't happen in prison. You know, and it was a really interesting time for them because there were some, you know, there were some folks that were making some decisions in the system, you know, as far as what groups they were clicked up with and stuff. And, you know, we had a conversation. I said, I'm fully aware that when you leave the doors, you probably are not going to be able to talk because you have to keep some of that tension going in certain ways so that it doesn't explode. But I love the fact that they wanted to figure out how to come together to prevent the younger parts of themselves and their younger brothers from coming into the system, whatever thing that they, you know, were clicked into or believed in or had signed up for. But they all collectively wanted to figure out how to deal with these younger generations coming in at younger ages, getting longer sentences, especially the young men of color, that's a whole nother issue as far as
15-year-olds getting 20 and 30 years. I'm like, how does that happen? Especially when we're seeing their brains are not developed. How are we that punitive and not restorative at all?
Absolutely.
At all.
Yeah. So Kim, tell me, how many places is the IF program since you've been doing this? Is it in other places? Has it been replicated?
Parts of it have been replicated. It depends on, and then there's people looking at parts of replication. Tucson, Arizona's been doing the youth piece. Richmond, Virginia's been looking at doing some stuff. We've been in Alabama is in the men's prison, and they're doing the writing workshop. They're actually doing some great research there with Beta Gov at NYU down the road here. California is looking at some stuff. We just got a Bureau of Justice Administration Second Chance Act grant. Probably we just got a 1-year extension, so we're going into our 4th year to actually put together a women's reentry program. And so we put together a PrEP guide, which stands for Personal Reentry Education Plan, because everybody's needs are going to be different on some level. It's custom. It's kind of like you go to college, get your core classes, then you choose your electives. I kind of look at reentry like that. You know, there's some core things we know, but the electives are going to be a personal thing that you know that you're going to need. So we built a 12-part program with what I would call, unfortunately, the frequent flyers that had been coming in and out, in and out, in and out. And we got 12 of them. We said, hey, you got to help us here. Let's build this program. So they actually built this program. So it's pretty cool. It's a little booklet that they can work in, and they can put their plan together, A through at least D or E, because we know A, B, and C sometimes doesn't work. The perception versus the reality of reentry, I think, has been the most shocking thing that I've had to learn. They can think everything is going to go this way. Everybody can't wait till they hit the gate. And then when they get out, it's a lot faster. It's kind of like when somebody dies, everybody there, and there's a flurry going on, and then everybody leaves, and the isolation and the loneliness, especially for women, is extreme, because there's a family component that gets built inside when they're inside, and they are told, great, go, and they're super excited to go, but they leave that family, and they're told you can't talk to them anymore, and you can't connect with anybody on the outside. If they've got a record, you'll be in trouble. So what are you walking out to?
Yeah,
you know, it's kind of like
scary.
That is quite challenging.
Yeah, I mean, research will say it's like coming home from war.
Yeah.
You've been in a place that you can't describe because most people don't experience it, and the trauma that you've been through that may have led you there or that you've experienced there, and you're coming home to a society that's like, well, you've been here, so now you can't have housing, you can't have a job, and it's like, but I've done my time.
Yeah.
And since between 75% of women are mothers.
Yeah, and you're still punished. You know, what you think is over, it's never over, and it's always there.
Call it the Scarlet F.
Yes.
That's what I call it.
Yes. Soul sisters.
My brother, my sister from another mister.
That's right.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I call it the Scarlet F, because no matter what, it follows you to your grave. And as a legislator, that is something that I'm working on, because I believe that if you can come out of this system and get back into the community, and you can hold down a job, you can stay out of trouble, you can do all the things that make you a quote unquote good citizen, because I'm still trying to figure out what that is, because we all fall short.
Yeah.
Okay, ain't nobody perfect, but we want to put them on a trajectory where they have to be perfect, and I don't think that's fair.
And then we don't give them anything to realize, you know, whatever it is we want them to be. I mean, I get it. I'm a felon all day. And on any given day, someone will happily remind me that
I'm going to remind you, Babz, you're a human.
Thank you.
That made a mistake.
But I'm different than a lot of folks because I have done a lot of work, right? Done a lot of work, but everybody hasn't. And so the world will break people readily and easily if you don't have some tools and a community to sort of hold you up. And what happens is a lot of these women come out and they don't, and they already got compromised issues with family and bridges burned and all that kind of stuff. And then you got to deal with housing. And then if your kids, my kids are adopted. A couple of their parents, biological people, were incarcerated. That's just the reality of what happens, right? It broke my heart to hear, this kid was adopted and an adopted mother wouldn't come. But I also understand we don't know what that woman's story is.
Exactly.
And what she, what was the weight of her breaking point with this kid.
Absolutely.
Right? See, that's the other part of it. So I can,
there's another side
to
the story.
I can hear it because I've got challenging kids and, I would never abandon them. But I certainly understand when you get to the place of, okay.
And everybody's capacity is different.
Yes.
The straw that breaks your back is not necessarily the straw that breaks my back.
Right.
And what I'm able to deal with is not necessarily something that you could deal with. Or you may deal with it in a different way. It doesn't mean that you're not dealing with it. You're just dealing with it in a different way. And it doesn't make it right or wrong. And I think it's important that when you come through the system and you've paid your debt to society, and you've come home and you've done all the things that you've been asked to do.
That you're not keep paying. You're not paying.
There comes a point when that is pardoned, expunged. I mean, however we want to do this, but it needs to disappear. It doesn't, I don't think it's fair for people to have to constantly be reminded about the mistakes that they've made and paid for. Because how many people have made the mistakes and not paid?
Well, I was in Japan last year, and once you serve your time, you don't have to tell anybody you've been gone. Obviously, culturally, going to be very different because people are going to be like, where's your son or your daughter? But you don't have to. I think the only two caveats I would say to that is, unless it's a sex offense that's predatory or a child-related crime, those are the two that I think we need to have a little bit more oversight on, because I think those are sometimes the most difficult to rehabilitate. But then even a conversation I had within, sex offenses or stuff, some of these kids that are having to register as sex offenders for the rest of their lives, if it doesn't look, I hope this doesn't sound bad, but if it's doesn't look predatory and it's just like
if you're 16 and you're having sex with an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old,
let's reevaluate that.
Yeah, let's look at this.
Let's reevaluate that. I'm not talking about like the extremes that we have, and I also, I think if you took a look at folks that we have incarcerated, it's a very, very, very small percentage that actually have that criminal mind that we need to be super concerned about. So, is there a way to figure out how to assess that so that when we're actually taking a look at when somebody gets out? I mean, we've got a guy on our If Speaking team that, he got clemency. He was never supposed to get out, and he was in for the rest of his life. And I am not worried about him, reoffending. I'm not worried about him reoffending. In fact, he's brilliant in the way that he's able to talk to some of these young men about finding their voice, talking about what they need, not using their fists to do it. Yeah. And we're also starting to hear men talk about, I need to deal with my trauma. Well, we don't as a society allow men to deal with their trauma, and they will deal with it in a violent way. That's a criminogenic factor.
Over again, yes.
So women, we get in unhealthy relationships, chemical dependency issues. Those are two factors that lead to incarceration for women, and they're going to, Dr. Emily Salisbury at UNLV is going to add anxious depressive symptom and, of course, economic marginality. So the differences in what lead a female and a male to incarceration absolutely need to be looked at. And when you have people, too, that don't think we should be putting money into this, if we don't start putting money into this, then we are not going to, it's a public safety issue. We need to reduce people's wanting or need to actually commit crime in order to survive.
And not just public safety issue, it's an economic issue. We are investing our money in something that doesn't have a return. Because when they get home, we're still paying for them, right? And we have to look at the fact that we have a school to prison pipeline, and that children are being criminalized based on childhood behavior. My God, if I was a kid now, I'd be somewhere in somebody's juvenile detention center.
I'd probably be right next to you.
Hands down. So, I mean, that's the other frustration, because now you're dealing with kids that have actually been tracked for this system. And no one wants to speak to that. No one wants to talk about that. I sit around tables where we're discussing the arrest of 6-year-old and 8-year-olds. As a matter of fact, it was made mention or clarified in the last meeting that I was in that, well, I just want to state for clarity that it's not a actual arrest. It's not on their record for the 6-year-olds. And I had to lean over and say, the trauma is the same.
Yep.
I mean, how do you explain? And then you have these kids that already don't trust the police because of the experiences that they witness in their communities. And then you come into a school where they're supposed to be groomed and taught for future success. And because they're acting out, you put handcuffs on them and you take them out of there and you arrest them. Now they're stigmatized, they're traumatized, on top of whatever else is going on at home that has them acting up. So my thing is, can we stop doing this superficial work and start plucking this thing from the root, which is what you're doing.
Right. Well, I think when you talk about too, some of the research will say, 5th grade reading level is an indicator of how many beds that we're going to need to build for incarceration. And Babz, the story you shared yesterday about when you were inside and, these women did not know how to read and write. Oh my goodness.
It was amazing to me. And the first time somebody, one woman.
I do need to clarify something. I don't know very many women inside that don't know how to read and write. And I think that's what the other thing that I've been fascinated about is the intelligence and intellect that's actually inside as well. It's not, I want to make sure I'm not stereotyping everybody that's inside.
I know exactly what you mean. Yes, exactly. Because some of the best women, some of the finest, and I was
creative.
I was only there for 29 days.
Talent.
I was there for 29 days in federal prison camp. 29 days. And it was illuminating to me. I mean, there was women there who were incredible people, kind, nice, whatever fears that I thought I was going to face when I went in there, it all sort of, of course there's some hard heads in there. I'm not trying to not say that, but the majority of the women that I met were overwhelmingly supportive and protective and wanted to make sure that I had what I needed and, all these kinds of things.
People that have made bad decisions.
Just made bad decisions. And you hear these stories. And, when you get to the federal prison camp, by the time you get to the federal prison camp, some of these women have already did 20 years. So this is like the last leg of their incarceration journey. Or there were women there who, were only with minimum security, were just, just being held for a short period of time. It was stunning, the level of intellect and camaraderie that people showed me and shared with me. And so it didn't make it, I never felt like it was hard. I mean, I think if I had to do more time, I think I would have it would have been a different kind of thing. But because I knew that, I had a short period of time, I was able to sort of, just be in the situation and be like, okay, I got this. But when these women couldn't read, and a lot of them were Latinas, who just couldn't read, and I thought, oh my Lord, like what, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 women can't read their kids' letters and can't write back, and I was stunned by that. So I spent my 29 days doing that.
Right on. Well, and if you think about it too, if they're getting out and people don't want to hire them or don't want to give them housing, they're going to go back to situations in order to survive. Since I think it used to be 70, but Topeka Sam, who works for Cut 50, does amazing work. And she's
I know Topeka. Whoop, that's my
girl. With her in Philly next week.
Yeah, tell her I said hi. She actually was on this show when she had first got out. She came.
She's doing great
with
work.
Beatrice Codiani, who was with me in Danbury.
Oh, right on.
Do you know Beatrice? Beatrice Codiani.
I don't know if I've met Beatrice, but you've met Beatrice. Yeah. But the one thing that I think is interesting too is back to people saying, well, we shouldn't. What are we doing with these people? They broke the law. They did their time and whatever. I always tell people that are especially employers, like, you're going to write a check. You're going to pay one way or another. You're going to pay them with a paycheck, or you're going to pay in taxes to keep somebody incarcerated. Yeah. I don't know what it is here in. I think it's $29,000 a year. Is the national average?
Like 50.
Well, it's 52.
Like 50.
It's 52 in Seattle or in Washington State. That. But if you think about if that's the case, if you think about keeping 20 people out of prison, that's a $1 million that you're saving taxpayers. And if you think about somebody getting a paycheck, that means they're putting it back into the economy as opposed to taking from. It's an economic issue.
Well, this is why Texas did what they did, reform the way that they did it, because they were building all these damn prisons and they realized we cannot afford this. And so they quickly sort of redirected that energy and that money to do something else and close a lot of these prisons.
We could close our deficit here in the state of Connecticut if we made sure that as a reentry program, someone had to hire them.
Yeah.
If they were going to work, if every person that came out of prison was guaranteed a job and could go to work, my God.
Well, Washington State, there's a tax incentive if you hire somebody within a certain amount of when they're released. And then also, we talked yesterday. We have a trade related apprenticeship accreditation program in the women's prisons, so that the unions will come in because we're building so fast, and we have a very high rate of employment within the unions. And you're talking about getting out making $28 an hour starting full benefits as a mother. You can do that, raise your kid, and not have to go to a bad relationship or do something in order to make ends meet, because you're coming out usually to children. No offense to men, but a lot of them aren't coming out to having to take care of the responsibility of the children.
Yeah, because if men are coming out and they have kids, they're with their baby mothers or wives or grandmothers or or somebody.
That they got money on the books. From a lot of women. You go to a women's prison, how much money do they have on the books from men?
Exactly, Kim.
Goose eggs, 0. So I mean, there is so many things woven into really doing this work where you've got to, I cannot stress this enough, you have to separate the gender. And even in just looking at criminal justice overall, obviously police go in, get the situation safe, figure out what's going on, because it's safety for everybody. And hopefully you've gone through crisis intervention training or something like that. We have to do that in Seattle to understand what's going on, but it does have to be safety first. And then how do you assess the situation and the person that's in front of you? If you have a woman that's got 3 kids and she just shoplifted $300 worth of food, is it necessary to put her in handcuffs, take away from the kids? Right. Or if you know she's a mom, you making a phone call, or you saying, do you have kids? Is there somebody I need to call? There's certain ways that we can lessen the trauma and take a look at the human being that's in front of us. I'm not saying that we don't have to take action, because that's part of the job that we're supposed to do, but is there other type of diversion or something else or other options that we have, because we do have gray area and we do have discretion in the job that I do.
And I mean, when you look at the difference between who's going to jail and why they're going to jail, it's evident that there's discretion. And there's much more discretion given to white criminals than it is to black and brown criminals. And that's a discussion that needs to be front and center. It's the elephant in the room. I mean, if you ask me, you fix racism, you fix all of this. We talk about criminal justice, juvenile justice, social justice, economic justice, this justice, that justice. Nobody really wants to talk about racial justice. And when I say racial justice, I get corrected. Oh, well, you need to talk about social justice. No. If you deal with racism and you educate my kids the same way you do is you educate the other kids, and you give them it's not an achievement gap. That to me is an offense. There's a connotation that you're saying that the babies that look like me don't have the ability to achieve, and that's absolutely false.
Right.
It is a resource and opportunity gap. You give them the resources and the opportunity,
and the other part
and
of that
will perform.
is not necessarily, we're not saying you got to put our kids in white schools.
No.
Because somehow or other white schools are better.
No.
How about these schools
opportunity
make these
and
schools good,
gap.
so that when these kids are in these schools, they are equal to those schools. You don't have to necessarily bust kids all over the place. I think you can sort of see that the equality ought to be in the educational level.
Resources,
not separate and equal, just equal.
But you also have to make sure people are willing to take an honest look at the biases that they have. Because when somebody says I'm not racist, I'm like, oh wow, you haven't even taken a look at just the slightest way that you think when somebody walks in the room, depending on the color of their skin or what they look like. I think that that's a really uncomfortable conversation that people don't know how to have. And I don't know, there's obviously there's books and people have taglines and all that other stuff, but I think it's people really need to get real with themselves. What are you afraid of, or what is your perception? I mean, I've traveled out of the country recently, and I want to go back to it, so I won't mention where I was, but a couple of years ago, because the government would probably be like, nope, you're not getting in. But I was appalled at how the government was treating another country next to it. And when I came home, I still to this day,
we'll talk offline.
Still to this day, when I see somebody that I know is from that country where that government is so horrifically, it's just, I can't, anyways, horrific to this other country next door, a very kind, caring country, I have to check myself and realize those people don't represent that administration that's running that country, and just whoever's running a country doesn't represent the people and what they're thinking. But I have to check myself when I'm in a conversation or I know I have to do work, because I'm like, I wonder if they know what's really going on over there, and are they like that too? And then I'm like, okay, there's your bias. Like, let's put it out there and let's have a conversation that you need to have and meet them equally. We don't want to talk about race in this country. I'm sorry, we don't.
And it's so evident. It's so obvious. And I think that's the thing that's so frustrating to me. I was out in San Diego. We went out to the border because of what's going on with these immigrant children. And I've shed many tears over that. But it was a bittersweet experience for me. And it's always a bittersweet experience for me, because I'm out here fighting for these babies, and it's the right thing to do. And I'm looking around, and there's this rainbow coalition of people, all walks of life, cultures, races, you name it, gender, whatever. They're all out there, and we're on one accord, and it's a good feeling. And then I have to look around and say to myself, what about my babies?
Yep. Why does it have to get that extreme?
My babies. I mean, like, who's fighting for my babies? This school to prison pipeline. My babies have been taken from us. Our whole history in this country. When we landed here, they were ripping our babies from us, selling them. And basically still doing the same thing, because prison is profits. And that's how I see it. You know, you have a school to prison pipeline that is making a profit off of my babies. Who's talking about that? Who's upset about that? Who's rallying and protesting and doing the work around that? And I'm not saying that nobody is, because there are people that are doing it, but not on the scale that we see these silos of movements. And what we need to understand is that all these movements should be one movement.
Absolutely.
And that we all should be one people, treated equally. Where's the liberty and justice for all? And why can't we talk about privilege? Because I work with people at the State House that will look at me and tell me, white women, I don't have privilege. What do you mean? I hate that word, privilege. I'm not privileged.
I'm like, the fact that you can say that.
I'm
the
like,
fact
what?
that you come out your mouth with
Wow.
there's your example of privilege right there. So, Kim, I enjoy this film.
Thank you.
I hope it gets shared.
Oh, you have to come back.
And why?
I'm coming back.
I hope you
have
gotta
to.
come back.
Me and you have work to do.
And some
Babz,
scotch to drink.
all of us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
before you go,
Yeah.
what is your greatest hope?
My greatest hope is that people challenge themselves every day to get a little uncomfortable and have a conversation that they maybe don't want to have, and reach out to that person that, I don't care if it's the person giving you the coffee, but just spread a little kindness, because I think that's what sparks conversation, to learn about each other and build that thing you're talking about, which is more of a rainbow coalition instead of these silos. So my hope would be that we'd be a lot more kind to each other.
And your
to make this
wildest
change.
dreams for if? What's the wildest dream for if? Have you allowed yourself the bigness and expanse of that?
Wow. Oh, no what?
Like, you could say, I'd like to see this in, I don't know,
Well,
South America.
It's gonna. Well, we've been in Nigeria. The film just screened. Kathleen Haran got to go over to Dubai 3 weeks ago and screen it, which was pretty interesting. I would like for if to be available to anybody that's incarcerated to start answering that question, and I would like those stories to get out to the people that are in power that can make the changes.
And I think
Whatever that looks
in
like.
Connecticut, it should be mandated for every single lawmaker to have to visit these prisons, spend time in these prisons, talk to these people, talk to the citizens in these institutions. You can't just walk through and just like you're at the zoo.
I gotta be honest.
You need to have an interaction and let them know that they're not just on display, that you're here because you care.
Right.
And for me, love covers it all.
Yep.
I was told you can't legislate love by one of my colleagues, but I'm not trying to legislate love. That's something that you should come to this building with.
Yep.
Because if you come with it, then it shows up in the legislation.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to do right by people if you don't love and care for them.
Nope.
And that's why I'll ask people, just close your eyes and imagine it's your child or your mother or your sister, because now you're making it personal. You're making it human for them, because some people aren't seen as
can we
human.
get out of the, can we just, out of curiosity, can instead of it having to be so me, I, very linear, it's somebody's child. It was somebody's child that's in front of you that's going through this. It's not just yours. Like, that's that community. That's like taking care of the tribe that we actually really come from.
But we have to get back there.
Yep.
Because we used to be a village.
Yep.
And
yes,
with that village said, because we have got to leave.
Oh, right. Well, we're going to continue this conversation.
We have to. Kim is coming back. She got to come hang out.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Kathleen. This has been a wonderful experience.
Connecticut Women's Consortium.
Kim
Thank
Bogucki,
you.
I can't wait for you to come back.
All right, I can't wait to come back.
My soul sister, State Rep Robin Porter, you know it's always a pleasure.
Always real.
Harry, I'm about to leave. Thank you all for tuning in to Lovebabz Love Talk today, which feels like a very criminal justice insider. So if you missed it, it'll be on the podcast. It'll be up on SoundCloud, so you can go back and listen to it. Share it with your other folks. If you can see this film, go see this film. Thanks for tuning in to 103.5 FM WNHH, the New Haven Independent.org. I'll be back tomorrow, and I don't know who I'm talking to, but I talk to the most interesting people. I'll see y'all later.
Peace.
Sometimes the unexpected will lure a shattering gloom. The angry voices and tortured hearts have sullied dreams and aspirations on a cold New England night. I choose the art of dreaming. There's rust in the factory the weight of the world on my shoulders. The shadows of dusk consume my soul. My heart is loaded down with sadness. Is this the end of the world?
Hi, I'm Bella, and you can see my YouTube channel at SpideyGirls/Bella. You are listening to WNAHA LP 103.5 FM New Haven, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Follow us, and yeah.
Yes! Have you ever seen a show with fellas on the mic with 1 minute rhymes that don't come out right? They bite. They never write. That's not polite. Am I lying? No, you're quite right. Well, tonight, on this very mic, you're about to hear, we swear, the best star rappers of the year. So, cheerio, yell, scream bravo. Also, if you didn't know, this is called The Show.
This is 103.5 FM, WNHH, NewHavenIndependent.org, where you can listen to us on NewHavenIndependent.org, or you can stream live with us on WNHH through Facebook. You can go to TuneIn, and it's saved to SoundCloud. But nevertheless, I am here. My name is Michelle Turner, and I have the good fortune of hosting the show. We're going into our 4th year. So for me, this is a treat because for so long I've done radio, and radio has kind of done me in. But I am pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to still be able to bring information to the public, because that's what this is all about. This is community radio. It's 103.5 FM, and this is the show. My guest today is someone who is not a stranger to WNHH. In fact, she has a show, correct?
Mm-hmm. But it's not the show.
It's not the show. And we'll explain what the name of it is in a moment. But we were talking before the mics and the cameras flipped on. And as it turns out, this is a year anniversary since she's been on this show.
Yes.
So Keeper Bolden, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me again.
So the last time you were here, Women Grow was a brand new movement in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And Keeper deals with and in, I don't want to say the word deal, but in the cannabis industry. And she is really focused on cannabis health. And her business is called Canna Health.
Yes.
But talk about Women Grow for a minute. How's that doing? What is Women Grow doing in Connecticut?
Okay. So thanks again for having me.
Sure.
And yeah, it's been a year. I started with Women Grow. That was my first business in cannabis. And Women Grow is a professional networking organization that encourages, supports, promotes women as they become entrepreneurs in the cannabis space. And they do this by having monthly networking events all over the country, simultaneously the first Thursday of every month. And we're in about 33 cities and a couple of countries.
Wow, I didn't know it got
and international.
How long have they been around now?
They were established in 2014.
Okay, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, they really have grown exponentially over the years, and this last year was a time of great transition. So we have new leadership and a lot of new models and modalities that are being implemented to kind of help us in our roles as market leaders.
Okay.
But some exciting things are coming. You know, we're looking at potentially having a nonprofit leg and kind of really being able to give back to the community because Women Grow is a for-profit entity. But a lot of people, you know, take a little issue with that. But we do provide monthly quality programming. You know,
so in other words, the organization's beginning to make a little money.
Oh, well, I think it's not that. I think we've always, you know, were revenue building, but what has changed now is that I think the more, first of all, with new leadership, we've had a better understanding of what the cannabis community really means. And it's not just about business, although business is very, very important. Like I am a businesswoman. I have several businesses. I pray to God that they'll make me millions one day real soon. You know, however, I also realize that to be in this industry, I have to be an advocate. Yeah. Like I have to be a proponent for safe use, for access, for equality and fairness in businesses and the way the laws are written and things of that nature. And so I think that Women Grow has taken on that stance a little more. And so instead of just focusing on the networking aspect, which is really important because after education, building my network is what has helped me grow so quickly in this industry. Because again, I've only been in this industry for a year, and I've already, you know, accomplished some things that it would take several years for many people to do.
And talk about what those are.
So definitely obtaining the license and owning the license for Women Grow in Connecticut was a huge step. Yeah. Connecticut, Women Grow in general in the past have been, there were a lot of non-colored faces. Yeah. And so they had begun to open up the market a little bit. And I was like one of the first amongst many, but they were planted throughout the country. But at the same time, a lot of new women of color were brought to take the lead. And so I was fortunate to have made some interactions with the New York chapter and ended up meeting the CEO. It was a great kind of story. And then I got the license for Connecticut. So, you know, to be a Black girl from New Haven, you know, and to be associated with Women Grow, which is known nationally, you know, was just almost unheard of. And then, you know, I've spoken in several states, you know, usually on panels either related to healthcare, being that my background is as a registered nurse. And now I consider myself a cannabis nurse. So I've gone across the country speaking at different conferences and events just about the importance of utilizing cannabis as medicine and that it's accessible to all people and no longer criminalized. And so that's the other end of things that I've spoken across the country about, you know, just making this a fair and equitable industry and that there's diversity in leadership and ownership and that we have access for everyone again, you know, in the business side. So that's been pretty amazing. I've also, and I know we're going to probably go into it a little deeper later, but, you know, pretty early on in my cannabis career, I was recruited to be on a steering committee for a drug rehab center that utilizes cannabis to get people off of opioids, to help them work through the withdrawal symptoms. And so I am the co-chief nursing officer for this committee. And it's based in Huerfano County, Colorado, which had the highest number of opioid overdoses in the state of Colorado. And so they really wanted to implement a program. So we've been working to put that in motion there. And then my hope would be to bring that model back to Connecticut so that we're actually having a hearing June 25th with the Board of Physicians to add opioid use as one of the diagnoses for which people could obtain their medical marijuana cards. Okay. So, you know, I've been able to be instrumental in seeing that work in a legal state and how it works. So I'll be able to bring that back here. So again, something I never thought, I would have imagined. And then, just really kind of doing interviews, being on television, just things that I never, I didn't aspire to, or,
right.
I didn't really want to do. But I think the most important thing to me is really finding an area of focus for my advocacy,
mm-hmm.
and being able to begin a conversation to heal my community. Because people look at me like I'm crazy half the time, but I love New Haven. I love the people. I love my community, and we are suffering as people. And part of it is that we have been residents in a war zone.
Right.
The war on drugs was really a war on people. It affected people's lives in many, many ways. The trauma of slavery has just reinvented itself, through mass incarceration and the onslaught of drugs and alcohol into our communities. And so, realizing that this is what has happened to my community and why we act the way we act, and why there are things that go on in our community that do, really kind of bringing that to light and talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, talking about complex urban traumas, really studying that and finding ways to heal and help my community. So it's just been such a year of growth and maturity and of insight and, of sacrifice. I've always been a really hard worker, as a nurse, and made great money, but really kind of stepped away from that to be able to bring this knowledge to my community. Yeah, because I could have went to New York and worked in cannabis, or gone to Colorado and worked in cannabis and gotten myself a pretty nice check, more than likely. But my goal was to bring the information to this town that I love, so that we all could partake in the benefits.
So I'm going to roll it back a little bit.
Okay.
Dial it back. Women Grow. When you first came on, you talked to me about how, and it's looking at it from that advocacy standpoint that you just spoke so eloquently about. When you started to talk about how decriminalization was something that would benefit African Americans, specifically in New Haven, because of the history that we've had with the war on drugs in this city.
Right.
Have you made any progress in the African American community as far as going out and talking to people about what you're trying to do and how you're using cannabis not only as a business but to heal?
So
that answer is
I'm trying to share this. I'm sorry, I got made noise, but I was trying to share it on my page. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But it's been interesting. So I definitely have a following to an extent of people who kind of listen and come to events and maybe partake in events at times.
Hey, Norma Reyes. Sorry. Got to shout Norma out. How you doing, Norma?
Well, while you do that, I'll go share it then.
Okay.
But, I really have not had, I thought more, because when I really started studying cannabis and started going to events and things of that nature, like, I was on it. Like, I didn't care. I would call out of work. I would take a day off. I would drive. I would pay to go or whatever. And so I knew that people from my, community probably wouldn't do all that I would do, because I could be a little extra sometimes. But I felt like that if I brought it here, they would come.
Right.
If you bring it,
they will
I
come.
thought that was gonna be the case, but it really didn't quite happen like that. It still is a lot of pulling and prodding, and I feel like if I could do things a little differently, I would have just probably quietly laid the foundation
and then approached.
Yes, because one thing about our community, we don't believe it till we see it, till it's happening, and unfortunately a lot of times we don't respect the process or have patience for the process, and we're not willing to sacrifice for the process.
Yeah.
And so I think because of the fact that cannabis is not legal. So, in our state for recreational adult use. So, and our medical program is very limiting because it's only open basically for pharmacists and pharmacy techs.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, but go ahead, finish.
So I think because of the fact that hasn't really materialized in the way in which I have been professing it will be. I think that's caused people to not necessarily buy into it fully. I do have people. I own Canna Health, and we are a cannabis-based health and wellness center, and I do medical marijuana evaluations and get people certified to become medical marijuana patients in the state.
Okay.
And I do now that they are buying into. Everybody wants their medical marijuana card, and unfortunately, fortunately, in this situation, one of the diagnoses that we're able to certify people for their medical marijuana card is post-traumatic stress disorder. And 9 times out of 10, especially if you're Black, brown, from the inner city, you have PTSD.
It's a part of it.
You've had some traumatic event, at least one. But again, in our community, is more complex. There's several traumas. But anyway, because of that, like, people definitely are supporting. They're sharing that information, And I was just having this conversation with Markeisha out there a little bit about,
hey, Markeisha.
The fact that that I wonder sometimes, like what I have envisioned, and it's just my little vision. I mean, and it's a humble vision. It's not like, I'm not saying like I'm gonna change New Haven, like, not like that, but from the perspective of, how great I know it could be for everyone. This is our one opportunity, in my opinion. We'll never be at the stage of the end of cannabis prohibition, where businesses and opportunities will open up. We'll never be here again. So I just feel like if we're able to engage people, we'd be successful. But they